Chapter 11. After I left Ritardo, the night was pretty much a bust all around. No sausage, no sheep anywhere. My paws were tired and my spirits low by the time I turned back toward the Good Shepherd. The kid had promised food and a place to bed down. I'd see if he was as good as his word. He was waiting by the door, slumped over with his forehead on his knees and his arms wrapped around them. I guess it was later than I thought. I licked his hand and he woke right up. Jack! He threw his arms around me. Jack, boy, good dog. I knew you'd come back. And all that sort of thing, pounding me half to death. Okay, so here's the plan, he said. I got to sneak you in. No way they will let a dog in there. So we got to be real quiet, okay? What I liked about Ritardo right off was that he talked to me man to man, or person to dog, I should say. He knew me for a smart dog I am. I began to belong with him because of that, because he knew my worth. Ritardo reached for the door handle. Okay, let's go, he said. The door shushed open. Fingers of cold air came reaching out. My nose sniffed for information. Floor wax, soap suds, boiled cabbage, sorrow. I followed Ritardo, who scurried ahead in a low crouch. I guess he thought he'd be smaller that way, invisible. But the crouch is basically an attack position. Any half-grown sheep knows that. This kid has a lot to learn. The hall was dark and quiet. I could hear the soft breathing of children asleep nearby. A peaceful sound, but a clock ticked overhead as if we were stealing its minutes. No, no. No, no. No, no. No, no. Paper rustled in the room as we passed. Then I heard footsteps. Quick, in here! Ritardo closed the door quickly behind us. The room was long and narrow with high windows. Squares of moonlight fell upon the beds, each with a lump in it the size of a boy. Well, a child, but they were all boys as it turned out. Under here, Ritardo said, lifting a corner of the thin blanket on a narrow bed. I'll find you some food, but you have to wait here and be real quiet. He reached under the blanket and pulled out a bunch of musty towels he'd stuffed in there to look like he'd been sleeping all along. Those went under the bed with me. Then I was alone. There was not one speck of dust under that bed, not a bug or a cobweb. It made me uneasy. It seemed unnatural. Dirt was a necessary part of things kids did, like playing softball and building forts. They liked dirt. What kind of place was this? I waited, listening. Footsteps. I held real still in case this wasn't the kid. I'm sorry, Jack, Ritardo said, reaching under the bed to pat me with an empty hand. I liked the smell of his hand. Boy sweat. A good, honest smell. They lock everything up there. I'll bet you're real hungry, aren't you, boy? I'll make it up to you, I promise. I'll think of something. His eyes were so sad. He lay beside me for a while on the floor, his hand on my back. After a while, he said goodnight and climbed into bed. I fell into a half sleep, the watchful kind. It wasn't long before the door opened and a shaft of light sliced the room in two. I woke right up, banging my head on the bed springs. I heard a boy stir in the nearby bed. Another called out of a dream. A loud sniff came from the direction of the door. Whoever it was had a good nose for a human. Laced-up boots marched down that space that separated the two rows of bed. They came to a stop at Ritardo's within inches of my nose. Shiny black boots, long black stockings. Up came a corner of the blanket. Eyes like raisins poked in dough stared hard at me. Down went the blanket. The bed began shaking back and forth. Luke, wake up, Luke! There's a dog under your bed. Well, I knew she meant Ritardo. I just didn't know Ritardo was his bad name, the one the other kids called him because he couldn't read. Get up, get out of that bed. Luke yawned and whined as if he'd been asleep, but I'd felt him awaken the second the door opened. What dog? He said in that innocent voice boys find when they need it. A hand reached down and threw the covers clean off the bed. That dog, said the lady. Then Luke's face appeared upside down. At the back of his neck was the doe lady's knotty hand. Luke grinned. Hi, Jack, he said. By then, the whole place was awake. Boys in striped pajamas swarmed around Luke's bed like sheep. There's a dog! Ritardo's got a dog! Back, screeched the lady. Back in your beds, every last one of you. A couple of the smaller boys melted away, but the others had fixed their eyes on me as I stood at Luke's side. He wasn't good for a meal or, as it turned out, for a bed either, but he'd done his best. Whatever would befall us together. There was hunger in the eyes of those sleepy boys, and not the kind that food settles. You could see they needed a hug to hug a dog, every last one of them. But the woman was having none of that. She stuck a whistle into her doughy face and began blowing and blowing. I wanted to bury my head in my paws. It was shriller than the train whistle. Other grown-ups came then. The boys were herded back to their beds. You, the woman pointed her finger straight at Luke's nose. Come with me. She turned to a young man with a bunch of keys weighing him down. Get that mutt out of here. Talk about your low blows. Jack, cried Luke, but the lady had him by the ear and was dragging him out the door. I gave him a little woof for courage and headed for the door myself. I knew which way was out. Always have. The man with the keys was all right. He talked to me in the hall the way people do, nonsense stuff. Good dog, that's the way. Come along. That's it. Like a good dog now. Here we go. He patted me on the head a couple of times and opened the door. Goodbye, Good Shepherd. It was a full moon night, a night you want to be nestled on a hillside, the sheep hunkered down, dreaming whatever sheep dreams. I was regretting not having given that doe lady's hand a good nip. Not an all out bite. I could tell by her wrinkled up face that she wasn't a mean soul. She had a job to do and was doing her best to see that it get done. I could understand that. The problem is that children aren't sheep. Somewhere along the way, that woman lost sight of what a real boy is. Mostly what a real boy needs. Food, sure. A warm bed to snuggle into at the end of a long day. But a boy needs love most of all. A boy needs to be told he's a good dog. Good boy, I mean. Well, there isn't as much difference as you'd think. Treat a dog like he's worthless, and that's the way he'll turn out. Same thing for boys. I could tell by the way Luke carried himself, his shoulders already hunched, that he had no idea of his worth. What he could do in the world if he was given half a chance. Too many years like that, and he'd be acting as mean as Billy. Deep in my canine soul, I knew one sure thing. Luke had to get away from that place. The Good Shepherd had nothing to do with it, as far as I could tell.